Well, I think everybody's cleared in. So whenever you guys are ready to go, feel
Okay.
free to start.
Saved them from singing. Who's next? Hi, everyone. Welcome to Giving Tuesday Zoom celebration for the Men Project. We are really excited that you decided to join us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you for dedicating your time to raise a proverbial glass to the Men Project. Just to our supporters and to all of those who benefit from the work we do to address and prevent domestic violence in the form of emotional abuse and double abuse. We want to start our time really just by introducing our team to make sure that all of you know who is doing all that we do. In New York, we have our wonderful Lauren Hatch. She's our social media content manager. Lauren is waving. Here with us in Orange County today, a little bit behind the scenes, is Jill Rice. She's our executive coordinator. She's our guru for all training, outreach, and just the behind the scenes on all of our training that we do. And most of you that are here today know our founder, Annette Oltmans, but you haven't had the distinct opportunity to work with her as we have. Annette is truly passionate about the Men Project. She's worked tirelessly to put forth top of the line, the most effective curriculum, materials, tools, and resources that help all of those impacted by abuse. But what you don't know, because you don't get to see the behind the scenes stuff, is this woman just breathes life through who she is as a person into each and every survivor or first responder that she mentors. She spends tireless hours behind the scenes, on phone calls, at lunches, really breathing life into them, connecting survivors with much needed resources. And so coming out of all of that engagement, there's a wealth of information that gets added to every training with every new survivor she meets and every new first responder that she gets to help along the way. So it is my sincere pleasure and privilege to introduce Annette Oltmans.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I just would love to, well, we're drinking apple cider, but hopefully you have champagne. I just want to raise a toast to all of our supporters for your encouragement, your financial support. We really couldn't do the deep work that we do without your support. I also want to thank City National Bank, one of our corporate sponsors, for their generosity. We so appreciate it. So cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Well, before I go into what we have accomplished this past year and our goals for next year, I wanted to just, and for those that are new, I wanted to touch on why I founded the Men Project. And it really comes out of my personal experience dealing with emotional abuse and double abuse in my marriage, which, thank goodness, through the right help and the right interventions, we've been able to heal our marriage. But so many are less fortunate because what happens is when victims reach out for help, they're often judged. And as I was judged for separating from my husband, while others judged me for not filing for divorce. I was spoken down to, and it was highly traumatizing. So I was criticized rather than treated with compassion and support. It took tremendous hard work. And I also, during this hard work, I chose to do a lot of academic research, as well as interviewing hundreds of victims, hundreds of therapists, and hundreds of faith-based leaders, which led me to understand that what I was experiencing was not unique. Double abuse is a prolific, insidious problem for all victims experiencing any form of abuse. I personally experienced and witnessed gaping holes in education surrounding emotional abuse and best practices for how to respond to victims when they reached out for help. And I wanted to provide not only to fill those gaping holes through education, but I wanted to provide validation to victims, education, and tools for how to interface with victims by using best practices, and how to best interface with those who cause harm, because they're broken too, and everyone can benefit from proper information and best practices. I learned from my personal experience reading countless books on abuse and research in my interviews that the most devastating and traumatic experience occurs when victims experience a secondary layer of harm by those they thought they could trust, their family, their therapist, their faith leader, or frontline organization where they were first seeking help. I call the secondary layer of harm double abuse. And I knew that the best way to prevent double abuse was to train those first responders who were most likely to hear a victim's first disclosure of abuse. The Men Project, it's important to understand the differentiation. We are very different from domestic violence service providers in that we meet victims and first responders in the space where victims are most likely to first reach out to help. And that is most often not a domestic violence service provider because they often don't yet understand that they are dealing with domestic violence. So they reach out to those who they feel they can trust to help heal their marriage or to unravel the complications of their relationship. This middleman group of responders is mostly untrained to identify abuse and respond to victims and those who cause harm in ways that they're untrained to respond in ways that won't cause further harm. And I'm talking about therapists and faith leaders. You would think that they're training, and victims who reach out to them assume that they have training, but that's just not the case, which is what I learned in my extensive research. Unless they have specifically embarked on a program to educate them, they don't know how to respond. They don't even know how to identify abuse, and they don't even know that emotional abuse is a form of domestic violence. So there's gaping holes. And after conducting trainings to countless organizations, therapists, and faith-based leaders, we can tangibly see that what the Men Project teaches works. It is common that those who participate in our training say they have never heard this language before. It's groundbreaking and it's innovative and it's very specific and directive. Even domestic violence service providers say we are meeting a need and using terminology that is innovative and impactful. And I am humbled and invigorated by the fact that our website materials and training also helps countless victims. The traffic on our website is exponentially increasing each month. Therapists use our website with their clients. Victims use it to gain clarity and to help advocate for themselves with their therapists or with their pastors, or just to have clarity in their own mind to be able to understand what they're dealing with and what their steps need to be. And it also helps those who cause harm learn about their abusive behaviors in a way that challenges their prior thinking. So I am proud of what we've accomplished, and I'm thrilled for what is yet to come. We have invited Eric Hurd to join us today, who is a pastor at Mariners Church in Irvine. He works with difficult couples and often faces domestic abuse. But before we talk to Eric, we will now see a short video where Kay tells her story. A couple of things to notice are how confused, and you'll see her describe this. She'll say, she was mocked for being confused as she was in an emotionally abusive marriage, and how she was then doubly abused by both her therapist and her pastor. But I want to draw your attention to is that Kay's story is not unique. In almost every abuse book that you may read, the same story plays out over and over again. And I found the same to be true in my personal story and in all the research that I conducted. It's a significant and prolific failure in humanity to doubly abuse victims who are seeking help. So let's pause before we talk to Eric and take a look at a short video of Kay's story.
My name's Kay Schneider, and I am a family life educator, working primarily with families that have been broken by addictive behaviors and abuse. Interestingly, I only learned of my abuse in retrospect. After a second affair, my husband left, and I found myself in a 5-year legal battle for a divorce. And in therapy, I saw a domestic violence power and control wheel. And as I looked at that wheel, I recognized financial abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, things that I never felt were abusive. I never knew, because abuse to me was loud, screaming, name calling, or black and blue marks that someone could see. So the more subtle forms of abuse were unknown to me. Verbal abuse, as I look back and as I went through therapy, realized that so often the behaviors of my husband were to minimize me, to ask questions that he knew I didn't know the answer to, and I began to feel stupid, and I began to feel incompetent. I remember asking him once, "Are you trying to make me feel stupid?" And he just laughed. And I remember him saying to me one day, "Oh, so are you fused today?" And I realized he was mocking the confusion. So the feeling of insanity and confusion in the home continued to where I lost trusting my instinct, didn't have a voice, always looked to him for leadership, looked to him for advice and partnership, because I also religiously was taught the man is the leader, so you submit. And I was always praying for things to get better. But because he was home, he was in the church, he was a great provider, how could it be abuse when you have a loving Christian home? Eventually I realized it was all a facade. The abuse not only came from my husband in lying and betrayal and finances, but then when I went to pastors for help, early in my marriage, I went to my pastor and I would say, he's not talking to me, or we're not connecting. And I remember very specifically a time when he said, "You demand resolve. And when you demand, you shut your husband down." And so that's maybe one of the first conscious times I remember I needed to shut my voice down. And as I look back, I had to shut down the emotion. I began to doubt myself. After my husband had a first affair, I went to the pastor and I was basically told to regain intimacy, I needed to, quote, feed the dog, which meant to have sex, resume sexual relations, which felt weird when I had been betrayed. We went to therapy, and I realized looking back, the therapist never dealt with the betrayal. He never dealt with the lies. Why did my husband think it was okay to lie? Never dealt with the trauma of a betrayal like that. I didn't know until a second affair and a book on trauma that, I've been re-traumatized. The religious abuse would be, I'm supposed to submit and obey the elders or the leaders. And so again, I shut down that this behavior was not helpful to me. It was not loving. And again, it was, you go home and wait, you pray more. I remember calling the pastor saying, I just found out about this second situation. And the pastor's answer was, well, you didn't tell me you have an anger problem. And I said, wait, my husband's cheating and what? And so I said, I've been to therapy. I had an anger problem years ago. I've been to therapy. I've worked through that. So again, professionals that I sought after to help my healing actually did more damage. The help from the therapist and the help from the pastors continued to be minimizing of my emotions, minimizing of my voice. The advice first is to listen, to affirm that how they perceive their situation is true for them, to not minimize it. Don't quote scripture, try to spiritualize, don't try to pacify them like God's going to use this for good, but hear their voice and encourage them that what they are experiencing is real.
Okay. So now I'd love to introduce Eric Hurd. Eric, thank you for being with us today. You've been so helpful, not only by being vulnerable about your personal story of generational abuse, but by sharing how you've grown and how you respond to couples where abuse is present since you've adopted the teachings of the M3ND Project. You're one of the hardest workers that I know, putting in countless hours to help those in need. And I just so appreciate you. Please, if you would, briefly let everyone know about the work you do and how Kay's story resonates with you in a church setting?
First of all, it was so difficult to see that video. And the reason is I've been a pastor a little over 45 years. And in that time, I've worked with thousands of couples. And that old adage, Annette, is I wish I knew then what I know now. I've grown in my ability to work with really unhealthy couples. But one of the things that I would say early on in working with couples, I was naive to the level of abuse that goes on, and especially in the verbal and psychological level to women. And I am much more compassionate today and much more equipped to step in to very difficult marriages. And I will tell you, early on in working with couples, I would say my highest value was to save the marriage. And a shift that's happened is my highest value is to protect the woman and to protect the children, because abuse doesn't just happen to the wife, it happens to the children as well in many cases. And what I love about the Men Project, it is made me even more resolute in showing compassion, in exercising compassion to the woman, because I am so much quicker to catch abuse than I ever have been. And the advantage I have in who I am is I now can protect the woman, but I also can speak into the man, because he's doing the one that is abusing. But one of the things that the Men Project has helped me to do is to have compassion, to protect the woman, and to have the skills to lean in to educate even the husband of how he's abusing the man. So what I love about the Men Project, and as you define why the Men Project is so important, is you're helping the first responders, the people that step into these marriages and are working with these women that are being abused. And I certainly understand the double abuse. That's where I'm a little bit emotional today, because in my field, I would say most pastors are naive, not callous, but naive. Now, some may be callous, but naivety is no excuse to not protect the woman. This is where we've got to get this out. And that's why I'm so passionate and willing to help in any way I can.
Thank you, Eric. You mentioned compassion. I'm wondering, we spoke before about your takeaway from after reviewing the comprehensive curriculum and going through that process. What did you glean about compassion in the curriculum?
Well, it's interesting in asking that question. There was a moment in which Jesus was looking out at the kind of the marketplace in Jerusalem, and he looked at people and he saw them as downcast and distressed, like sheep without a shepherd. And when a woman is abused, and you know my generational story, my mother was abused by all three of her husbands. There was no battered women's shelter for her. There was no rescue for her. Jesus looks out at the world and he sees the abuse that women incur by the person that's supposed to most love them. And so compassion, Jesus saw it for everyone. And so I don't care what faith background, doesn't matter what race, creed, color, socioeconomic condition. Compassion is when a person feels with and understands a person's story and chooses to, instead of stepping back and ignoring it, stepping in and helping. And that's what the Men Project is doing and is going to do in volumes, is to step in and help people to not just feel empathy. Compassion is doing something about it.
Thank you, Eric. That's really all that I wanted to ask you today, but if you have anything else that you'd like to speak into, feel free to do so, because we always love to hear from you.
Here's the one last thing I would say is that like me early on in ministry, I had little, if any, education in this area. It is the silent sin, both outside the church, because that's where I lived. My mother, I grew up in atheism, but then I became a follower of Jesus. And when I got in the church, I found out that the church is sadly silent. I can't remember a message on this whole area of abuse. And yet it's prevalent outside and inside the church. How do I know? Because I've worked with thousands of couples in the church, and we stop it. So that's my last words.
Thank you, Eric. You're awesome. We so appreciate you.
Thank you, my friend.
Okay, now I'd like to turn it over to Stephanie so she can talk about what we've accomplished this year.
Well, thanks, Eric, bringing tears to my eyes right before I get to talk. I'm just really grateful that you're all here and that you're considering supporting the Men Project. And the first thing I want to say is I really want to encourage all of you to connect with Annette and me and meet with us in person if you're confused about how your resources can benefit the cause that we have or that you want to learn more. And so please respond to us on our invites to get together. We would love to meet with you. Here's today what I would share about how you can come alongside us through your donations. You know, as Annette said, we know from our experience now, a few years of doing a lot of trainings, that what we do works. We actually do have the impact that we hoped that we would have. And it's on frontline individuals, but there's also a great need for what we provide direct to victim survivors, as well as how we are able to interface or teach people to interface with perpetrators of abuse. So one of the key ways that you can support is really just by helping us continue to do what we've been doing, by providing scholarships for organizations and individuals who are in the greatest need of the training, but who do not have the financial support to pay for training on their own. We look at training scholarships as about $3,500 per organization. Obviously, this depends on the size of the organization as well as the location. But we also are providing more and more trainings where individuals can take part of the training if they are not part of an organization or if the organization they are with is not doing a training. Those individual scholarships can range from $45 to $125 depending on the training that we're doing. Now, during COVID, like so many other organizations, we were really forced to stop doing our in-person trainings and needed to launch a virtual version of our introductory training. What happened when we did this is that we recognized how abundantly successful this is and how much of a need there is for deeper training on certain topics. So what we're going to be doing this next year is monthly public trainings that I'm calling them intensives right now, where they'll focus on certain key areas where people have indicated a need to learn more, and we simply can't go deeply enough in the introductory training. So each month we're going to be providing 1-hour trainings focused on things like how can a parent identify when their child is in a relationship that is abusive? How to identify the signs of trauma or PTSD or complex PTSD so that you can know the person before you may have been in an abusive or is in an abusive situation. How to set appropriate boundaries within relationships. There's so many topics, so we're really excited to add that. What this allows us to do is live stream and expand our base and expand the name of men so that more people know about us, more people come and learn, and it will greatly impact larger numbers of individuals. The other way that you can continue to give in this way is by ongoing virtual introductory trainings we want to keep providing to the public in the hopes that we can train about 200 leaders, impacting about 600 individuals and 2,700 victims. We plan to do quarterly virtual trainings of the full introductory training that will be available to the public. In addition, we're going to keep training organizations privately. What's unique about our private trainings of organizations is that we work with the organization to use tools that mirror the scenarios they most often find themselves in with victims of abuse. So it's going to look a little different for a church than it's going to look for Planned Parenthood, or that it's going to look for a counseling group. We really put the energy in so that their whole team gets trained, and then all of the people that they meet on a monthly basis get the benefit of the change in methodology based on our training. Yeah, so let's go to the next slide, development of youth-focused tools. This I'm really excited about. This is something that's in process right now. And we're excited to complete the efforts towards cating our tools and resources towards youth. This is really coming out of the demand that we've been experiencing because of our connection with foster care agencies, a national anti-bullying organization, and the Youth Service Providers Consortium. As we have been training up people who work with youth, what we've come to realize is that it's most effective to be providing tools that are more youth-centered. And so using our healing model of compassion, our terms and definitions, we want to change some of the language so that kids can connect with them more understandably according to what they normally come across. And that parents have tools that help them to have these important dialogues with children. The other thing that we want to be launching coming out of this is really going one-on-one into the schools and talking directly with the kids, because as they learn about covert behaviors or unhealthy behaviors, they become more able to identify it. When they can identify it and we help to teach them how to set up appropriate boundaries, we can start moving more towards prevention of domestic violence so that these kids have an awareness of what's unhealthy in a relationship, and they are empowered to use their voice to speak against it. Another way, the next way that you can help us is by ongoing educational support through our website. Many of you have given in the past recognize that you previously donated for us to relaunch our website, which we did, and that has been hugely successful, as Annette talked about. This past year, we reached the milestone of having 10,000 visitors per month to our website. What's incredible is that we have a 0% bounce rate. That means people are getting on our website and they're actually reading the materials we have and gaining value from them. So it's a huge educational tool for us. And opens the door for reaching so many more people. So our goal this year is to double that number by moving to 20,000 a month. And the way that we need to do that is by adding new materials and continuing to be providing quality educational materials and tools for both survivors. Also, we have a lot of abusers who recognize their abusive behavior through the materials we draft. And finally, to our first responders, friends, families, organizations, you need to understand what to do to come alongside the victims in their communities. Finally, the thing that we're so excited for is the long-awaited launching of the virtual component to the M3ND Project's comprehensive training curriculum. This has been a far bigger endeavor than we ever anticipated, as some of you know who've been journeying with us for a while. The donations in the past have allowed us to complete a beautiful written curriculum and video curriculum. It's a 7-session deep dive into complex issues that speaks to survivors, abusers, first responders, family members, therapists, a whole group of people. We've had this curriculum peer reviewed by experts and critiqued by many people in the fields of abuse and trauma, by pastors, by marriage counselors, survivors, public health educators, you name it. We said we want to put this out there and critique it away because we really want it to be valuable to all of the audiences that we hope to serve. And as we're looking like what happened this last year with COVID happening, it sort of slowed everything down. It slowed down the launch of us being able to do this comprehensive curriculum in person. It slowed down even the finalization of the production of the written material and the videos. And so also a lot of the organizations that we work with have been really attacked and been under it sort of through COVID, just trying to meet all the needs of the people that they normally come around. So with that all being said, we've dug deeper into launching the virtual component of the comprehensive curriculum. And what we felt was prudent and the best way to use our resources would be by having experts in the field help us in the launching of this. We're working with an organization called Historic Agency, who has launched some of the most successful secular and faith-based curriculum in the nation. They've sponsored Rooted, which is one of the biggest curriculum in churches that's around in the United States and worldwide. they've been kind of the brains behind some of that. So we're working with them to be the most efficient in how we launch and to make sure that as we launch in the next few months that we do it really well. Before I go on to this further, we really wanted to share the words of one of our peer reviewers. She's an expert in trauma and abuse. And so, Lauren, let's put up Gwen's video right now. Gwen has been just a dear supporter of our organization, and she has such experience and wisdom. I'm excited for you to hear her thoughts on our curriculum.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gwen Irwin, and I'm a psychoanalyst in private practice in Orange County, California. As well, I'm a professional writer, book doctor, editor, writing and creativity coach, and an educator on the college, graduate, and postgraduate levels. Through my years of teaching, I have developed all kinds of curriculums across many topics because I have expertise in human development and working with trauma. In my years of training therapists who are trying to become psychoanalysts, I have noticed the absence of training about abuse and trauma in most graduate programs. Annette Oltmans and the M3ND Project have developed a curriculum that is vital for first responders. It's a beautiful curriculum, and it addresses certain pivotal points that are not uniformly or usually addressed that are a vital part of training. The first is covert emotional abuse. This form of domestic violence is subtle, nuanced, and pernicious. Usually, the victim feels the effects of it without really understanding what's happening to them. And so they develop a great deal of confusion and a lot of physical and emotional symptoms that they really can't explain. So this curriculum also goes into the link between covert emotional abuse and trauma. They go hand in hand. You can't have emotional abuse without trauma. And so this curriculum names what these covert emotional behaviors are. It helps first responders and victims understand their experience so that they can identify it and process it and begin to change it. The third element that is so vital here is Annette Oltmans' concept of double abuse. Double abuse occurs when a victim reaches out for help, and instead of receiving that help, they are rebuffed or judged or ordered or demanded to fulfill certain requirements or to take on certain responsibilities that have already led them into a traumatized experience. Annette identified this because of her own experience of having received that kind of response when she first reached out for help. And her naming it has proved invaluable in the training of first responders. So from these elements of covert emotional abuse, its link with trauma, and double abuse, we can now understand why victims develop post-traumatic stress disorder. And in the face of double abuse, that becomes complex post-traumatic stress disorder, a crisis of selfhood. I hope you will embrace this curriculum, enjoy it. It is rich, it is enlightening, it is inspired. Thank you.
She has such a sweet voice. I love her. I hope you enjoyed that. I know it was a lot, but we're really excited about what we get to offer in this next year. The first year of launching a curriculum tends to be the most expensive because you're setting everything up. And so with the organization we're working with, it will allow us to get set up properly, and the hopes that in year 2, we will be taking that on our own. In addition, a successful first year launch helps to multiply the impact in subsequent years. And our hope is that with those who are able to afford the cost for training, that will help to offset some of the scholarships down the line. But right now, we really need your help doing this and doing it successfully. Now, the easiest way to give right now is literally you can take out your phones and we can go to the giving slides, Lauren. to take out your phones, and you can text the language "We Mend" WEM3ND to the number 44-321. And that's a great way to give. It's going to take you to a page that'll allow you to put in your credit card information. Or you can use the return envelope that you received with your invitation. And you can write a check, or you can also put credit card information on that and we'll process it for you. Or you can visit our website at themendproject.com, and a little pop-up box will come up and we'll invite you to give for Giving Tuesday. Or you can just mail a check at 350 Forest Avenue. We're at Suite 488 in Laguna Beach, California, and that's 92652. But right now we want to open it up to any questions. And Lauren, if you can share, if you see questions in the question box, that would help us greatly.
So one of the questions that we had was about Eric. They were wondering what church he worked for and what his background was, and how he was connected to the MEND Project.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I work at Mariners Church in Irvine, California. And how I connected with the MEND Project really was through a personal relationship with Annette. And what I love is she really listened to my own story, because what I didn't share earlier was that I was separated from my wife for 8 months. And I was fortunate to have a wife that wasn't going to put up with my emotional and psychological abuse. I was a pastor at the time, and I was carrying on the abuse of my stepfather who raised me. And so for me, this is a personal passion of mine. But I was so fortunate to connect with Annette, and because she gave me words and descriptions of how I communicate abuse as I work with married couples. But again, I'm in Irvine, California. I work in a lot of different areas in our church, but mainly with married couples.
That's great.
Thank you. Another question that came in is, are we able to train school officials to combat bullying?
That's a fun question.
Yeah, I love, as we're focusing more on youth, we love training about bullying, because what we find happens just like it does in all other forms of abuse, not just domestic violence, is that in bullying, the victims are often doubly abused by their teachers or by school officials, because the school officials don't know how to recognize the signs of trauma that are playing out. And so they're missing, like they get caught up in who's telling the truth. He said, she said. Instead, we teach them, and we do a deep dive in how to recognize a victim's signs of trauma, which is a credibility piece for their authenticity. And we also train about the covert abusive behaviors, which play, even young children, they might not be able to articulate it, but they behave out those manipulative tactics. And we give a name to that for school officials so that they can best see what is abusive, what is happening, because so much of it is on the down low, like, sending out invitations to a birthday party and just omitting one person and then lying and saying, well, I sent it out. I'm sorry he didn't get it or she didn't get it. And just really, we have words to all these types of behaviors that really help school officials validate what is happening. So we definitely love the topic of bullying and feel that we speak really credibly into it in an innovative way. A lot of bullying organizations go in and they teach the children about how to be a kinder space. But what we really promote is how to confront the bully and how to support the victim properly so they're not experiencing added trauma from the double abuse.
I think I just want to add to that, as we were talking earlier about some of our youth-focused efforts. Some of that has really come out of a dialogue about bullying, and how when you empower kids to know and understand what's not okay behavior, and you help them to gain the courage to respond to situations that they see that are toxic or that are unhealthy or that are abusive, you're able to start to change a culture. And one of the organizations that we've been have worked with this on is that's kind of the model that we look at. And so we have felt that by training them on covert abusive behaviors to understand and to see more clearly, oh, wait a minute, that isn't okay. Because sometimes we just kind of don't know if it's us or it's not us. And it's confusing being the person on the receiving end. So for targets of bullying, that can be confusing. And so in order to mitigate the confusion, that's one of the big reasons we really want to get it and just start teaching about unhealthy behaviors and how to respond with good boundary setting.
We're raising their emotional IQs. We're empowering them and increasing their emotional awareness and IQs, which in turn empowers them to advocate for themselves and to have clarity.
Mm-hmm. Great question.
Yes. Another question, what is the best way to get this message into the churches today when the church doesn't necessarily recognize that they have this kind of problem?
Well, that's partially what we'll be doing through the Historic Agency, targeting churches, because we really feel that there's a great need. And we just need to get the word out there effectively. And Historic Agency is very experienced at this, and also through word of mouth. We're going to tap in on Eric to reach out to churches and other pastors who we've trained. And it's really word of mouth and our advertising and promotional marketing materials. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think another way too that I would add to this has been one of the fun things that we've been discovering through the different things we've had to do because of COVID is, in some of the trainings that we've had, there's these individuals that have had, spiritual abuse take place in their own churches who have a voice in their churches. And now that they've been through the training, there's more and more people that they're bringing in from congregations to be able to say, hey, we really want this training for our prayer teams, for our counseling teams. And so we're seeing more, there's different ways to go about it. And it's one of the reasons we're so excited to be doing the monthly trainings and to be providing more trainings publicly, although it's obviously it's more work on our part because it's more training, which we love doing. It is getting more and more people who are standing up and saying, no, we need to take this to the new level. So coming out of the things that we've done publicly has put us into conversations with church. There's churches right now that we're starting conversations with that we would not have been having the conversation yet. They wouldn't have been ready for the conversation, but for the fact that these people within their congregation have come to our trainings and believe it's powerful.
Another question that came in was 2020 has been a year of craziness. But what are some of your favorite memories of the experiences within the M3ND project this year?
Oh boy, let's see. That's a tough one. I mean, I think just really one of the favorites for me was getting all the feedback from peer review on our comprehensive curriculum, from domestic violence service providers, just didn't like all the different organizations and therapists and pastors and city professionals. All of those individuals were exuberantly positive and affirming of our materials, and they have a wealth of experience and they have never seen anything like it. So I have to say that validation for me and for us as an organization was really incredible.
Huge. Yeah.
How about you?
Well, we're having a blast all getting technologically savvy. I'm very much of I like to work room. I love to do, the breakout sessions and trainings in person. And so this drives me nuts. Like the virtual stuff drives me nuts. But what's been really exciting, the beauty in it has been there's something that makes people feel safe and engaging. And I've been quite honestly blown away at some of the brave questions people are asking that we don't get. We get it in person, but we more kind of tease it out more. I mean, we've needed to expand the amount of time that we put on a Zoom call because the people that are coming are so engaged. And that's been really fun. So there's something safety. It's almost like there's this anonymity or, they just don't feel as nervous. And so the richness of the education, I thought it would have been the opposite because I'm such an in-person kind of person. It's not. It's been very rich and it's gone super deep. And every training, I mean, it's like 60% of the people are staying half an hour late to answer questions because we always say, well, we're willing to sit longer if you have questions. And in my mind, I'm thinking they're ready to get off, like, get me the heck off the computer, right? No, they're staying and we're there half an hour longer hearing their stories. And that's been, I don't know, I think that's been really validating to say, this works. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a good question.
And it's just so beautiful to be in a space where someone is vulnerable with you and sharing such personal information and their insights, what they're gleaning from the training. Hearing a therapist and a pastor be vulnerable to acknowledge their prior thinking has now been changed, or hearing a victim share their experience and how they're coming to light about the severity of what they're enduring it's a blessed experience to be able to share that kind of intimacy with others.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Are there any other questions?
We have one more that came in. What is a story that you all heard from 2020 that may have impacted you the most in your work with the M3ND project?
Let me think. I mean, there's so many stories we get. This isn't a story of a victim. It's an experience with a therapist. She was on our training, and the first day of the training, it was a 2-day, hour and a half each day. The first day of the training, she was talking a lot and interjecting and giving a lot of feedback. And I could tell that she wasn't educated and her comments were incorrect. And so it was really delicate to walk through that walk with her and allow her the space to be heard and to speak. I mean, everyone's entitled to interject their ideas. But as we moved through the training and unfolded it and really massaged through the points that she would speak prematurely, and we hadn't got to that material yet in the training. So once we got through it all, the second day, she was absolutely silent. And after everyone had submitted their comments and asked her questions, I reached out to her and said, I forget her name, but do you have any comments or do you have any questions? And she said, I am just silent because I am learning so much. And to have someone who felt so confident in their knowledge the first day, and then to not offend her in any way. I think we do a great job at coming alongside people where they are rather than to place them on the defensive or to shame them in any way. This is a shame-free environment. And so to see that she didn't get defensive, she just really started to see the light that her mindset was incorrect and she had so much to learn and was very humble. And that was really amazing for me.
Yeah, that was cool. I would share, and one of the things that, again, has been sort of mind-blowing for me is, I come from a background of litigation where I've advocated for a number of people through custody disputes where there's abuse alleged with the kids. I've, worked with foster kids. I've been a community pastor, and I've come along. I've been that person who didn't know what I was doing, coming alongside people that are in abusive relationships. And I would say that when I came to the M3ND project, I think in my mind, I didn't really believe, I believe in the ability of people to get transformed. I didn't believe that there were abusers that were actually willing to be transformed. And I think that is actually a general belief that a lot of people share. So it's been beautiful. I mean, I'm always like tears streaming down my face when we get those inquiries through our website from people who've been harming their spouses through abuse. And who say, I have been hearing this for so long, and it wasn't until I read what was on your website that I was able to see, oh my gosh, I do this. And it's made me realize like why the term abuser can be so harmful, because who wants to identify themselves as an abuser in the same way that oftentimes victims, they don't want to identify themselves as a victim. But it's so beautiful for them to find clarity about what they're doing that's causing so much harm to this person that they want to love well, through our materials. So that for me has been the most humbling thing. And if they can get it, and I'm sorry if I'm being harsh, because I really kind of came from not believing that to be something that would happen, to now we've seen it a number of times. And that's just the people who've been willing to say something. There's more out there. And that to me is, that's a real testament to just how we do things a little bit differently, that we're creating a safe environment through our website and our materials that allows people to be willing to admit what they're going through. Yeah, that makes me happy.
Are there any last questions?
I think that's it. If anybody has another question, they can pop it in the chat or in the Q&A box.
Okay, well, I just want to thank everyone so much for your support, for taking time out of your day to participate. We so appreciate it. Time is valuable, and we just are so grateful that you chose to spend your morning with us. And my glass is now empty, but here, I'll use this glass. I want to raise a glass and say happy holidays to all of you, and a happy new year. And thank you so much for your support. Cheers.
Cheers.